Welcome to GCSE Medicine in Britain, or Health and Medicine, or The People's Health, or Health and the People. It doesn't matter. If you're doing AQA, Edexcel, OCR, or any other exam board, I have read, studied, and attempted to summarize all the information from all these exam boards for your GCSE history exams. So you'll know everything you need for your exam, plus a little extra from the others, giving you that added boost when you get to the exam and bringing you closer to seeing that 9 when results come out later in the summer. This is part 2, so we'll focus only on content. But if you're looking for extra tips on revision, tackling past paper questions, and how to approach them, check out the full video on my channel. Let's get started. Going into the 15th century, a period known as the Renaissance commenced. The French term Renaissance, which translates to rebirth in English, refers to a cultural movement that began in the late 1400s in Italy, later expanding into the rest of Europe and eventually reaching England. During this rebirth, Europeans looked back at their Greek and Roman past, not to return to it, but to use it as inspiration to promote classical philosophy, literature, and art, and to rejuvenate and advance society beyond the stagnation of the Middle Ages. Thus, artists, scientists, discoverers, and anyone infected by this rebirth began challenging common traditions and experimenting in different fields. Due to the rise of early capitalism, wealthy merchants, businessmen, and even royal families began to fund scholars, explorers, and artists. The discovery of America literally changed the way people understood the globe and introduced new products to Europe such as potatoes, chocolate, tomatoes, bananas, and tobacco, which we take for granted today. The invention of the printing press allowed new ideas such as humanism and the Reformation to spread fast and widely and challenge the all-powerful Catholic Church. This change in perspective declined the Catholic Church's power throughout Europe, allowing many to think outside the traditional medieval boundaries. The Renaissance eventually impacted medicine and public health as well. There was a renewed interest in finding out how the body works. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci incorporated scientific principles to recreate the human body with extraordinary precision. There was a significant increase in the importance of sharing and developing information in medicine and surgery. For example, the Royal College of Physicians, set up in 1518, was an organization in England focused on sharing ideas and setting high standards for qualified physicians. Now, let's examine what I like to call the Big Three, or the VPH. 3 Renaissance surgeons that significantly expanded and published new techniques and ideas to improve surgery throughout the 16th and 17th century in Europe. First came Andreas Vesalius, an ambitious physician born in Flanders, who was a pioneer in the medical field and even was appointed as personal physician to the powerful Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. Vesalius was able to perform dissections on humans as a local judge allowed him to use the bodies of executed criminals for dissection. Vesalius compiled his experience and discoveries into a book named The Fabric of the Human Body, written in 1543. In this book, he included illustrations and proof disputing prior mistaken knowledge of human anatomy, such as finding out that the human jaw was 1 bone and not 2. His book served as a statement to other medical doctors around Europe, not just to accept traditional teachings, but to investigate themselves to find the truth. His book was also used to train physicians across Europe and eventually in England, but we'll get to that later. Another pioneer, Ensayo Y Pare, also made several discoveries and advancements in the medical field. Born in France in the early 16th century, he rose from humble beginnings to become a master surgeon and became the royal surgeon to 4 French kings. Known as the father of modern surgery, Pare introduced and promoted gentleness and imperial observation to the front of surgery. He deserted the common idea of closing gunshots with cauterization, which he realized made it worse for the patient, as putting hot burning oil in your skin probably hurts a little bit. But during a battle, he ran out of oil and instead used a more soothing ointment that was used by the Romans in the past, made out of egg yolk, rose oil, and turpentine. He also designed various surgical instruments and techniques, including ligatures to close wounds, clamps, and forceps to enhance surgical precision. As an army surgeon, Pare treated many amputees, which led to him designing various cool and futuristic examples of artificial limbs. He also emphasized the importance of pain management. Although anesthetics had not been invented yet, he used opium to relieve some of the patient's pain. Overall, Pare achieved notable success, and his innovative ideas profoundly influenced future surgeons and physicians. He documented his techniques and observations in several influential works, including Treatise of Surgery, published in 1564, and Works on Surgeries, published in 1575, ensuring that his contributions would be passed on for future generations. To complete the Big Three of Renaissance surgeons, we have the English doctor William Harvey. Born in 1578, Harvey was educated at the University of Padua in Italy, the same as Vesalius, later returning to England to work at the St. Bartholomew's Hospital in London. He also joined the Royal College of Physicians and became the physician of James I. Harvey expanded on the ideas that Vesalius and other scholars at Padua had been working on, by focusing on dissecting human hearts and vessels and other creatures like frogs. He discovered that cold-blooded animals had slow-beating hearts and found out that valves in blood vessels prevent backward flow. He did an experiment where he attempted to pump liquid through the valves in reverse, which failed, therefore proving that blood flows only in one direction within the vessels. His theories were published in 1628 in a book called An Anatomical Account of the Motion of the Heart and Blood. As he was a high-profile surgeon and had worked with the king, his ideas on blood transport and transfusion were widely spread throughout England. For example, a follower of Harvey, Richard Lower, made the first blood transfusion in 1665. But a lot of these transfusions failed, which we will discover why in part 4. This also meant that many throughout Europe and England stopped believing in the old ideas of Galen. The work of the Big Three, Vesalius, Pare, and Harvey, greatly impacted further developments in Britain. Thomas Geminus, a Flemish author who migrated to England around 1540, published a slightly shorter version of Vesalius' work, adding eye-catching illustrations, which became quite well known and spread these new ideas in England. An English surgeon, William Claus, wrote several books on the development of surgery during the Elizabethan age. Claus and Geminus' work introduced medical knowledge from the rest of Europe into England. Additionally, around the 17th century, the Royal Society, founded around 1660, aimed to further scientific understanding, regulating and sharing scientific knowledge, and encouraging the development of science in Britain. However, it's important to mention that no matter how promising these advances were, several people still disagreed and attempted to label these new ideas as absurd as they contradicted the ingrained views of Galen and the Church. Additionally, many inaccurate beliefs still prevailed through the Renaissance. Supernatural techniques were still going strong, and other theories such as miasma and the four humors were still prevalent and employed up to the 18th century. Therefore, around the 17th century, medical ideas and beliefs were a mixture of traditional and new treatments. For example, let's compare two prominent doctors of the 17th century. Nicholas Culpeper's scientific and medical approach was rooted on traditional medicine, focusing on plants, astrology, bloodletting, and purging to deal with diseases. On the contrary, Thomas Sydenham, who became known as the English Hippocrates, focused on careful observation of the patient and wrote a book, Medical Observations, in 1676 that became a standard textbook for future doctors. He believed that diseases did not vary from person to person, but that instead there were several distinct diseases and that doctors needed to carefully identify and categorize these before recommending a cure. Public health was also complicated during this time. Between 1500 and 1750, Britain's population grew from 2.5 to 6 million, leading to several famines until new farming techniques in the 18th century provided more food. By 1750, industries like coal mining and other new jobs expanded, and trade, driven by colonialism, became a significant part of the economy as populations grew across Europe. However, colonialism and trade with America and the rest of the world brought some issues to Britain, though they were minor compared to the horrific exploitation going on the colonies. Everyone was now hooked on trendy beverages such as hot chocolate, tea, coffee, and of course, with that, high amounts of sugar, which led to new dietary concerns and health issues. But don't worry, most of the impoverished people did not have to worry about high levels of sugar or coffee addictions, as they had barely any food. Living conditions in towns were still flawed, with bad infrastructure, water, waste removal, and of course, several plagues, but we'll think about those later. After 1660, cheap gin became a popular escape for the poor, leading to the gin craze, with widespread alcohol abuse, crime, and poverty. Early regulations failed, but the stricter 1751 Gin Act, where the government imposed harsher penalties and tighter controls, finally curbed the issue. Doctors and physicians were still expensive for most of the population, so barber surgeons were still a thing, cutting hair and maybe your leg. There were also apothecaries and quacks who had little to no medical training but a good understanding of plants and herbs for treatment, and they focused on selling medicines and potions to the sick. Hospitals also significantly increased in number and importance throughout the 17th and 18th century. Although the monasteries, which had served as the old hospitals of the past, were closed down by Henry VIII around the 1530s, towns and cities opened actual hospitals as St. Bartholomew's Hospital and St. Thomas Hospital in London. Hospitals evolved into far more impressive institutions compared to the small centers of religious care and refuge of the medieval period. Hospitals were gradually becoming places to treat the sick rather than places for people to rest and pray. There were also slow changes to the way people dealt with diseases. Many swamps were drained because of the belief in miasma, and people became a little bit more sanitary, washing and changing their clothes a little bit more often. Additionally, due to the boom in exploration around this time, new medications became available to the population, such as opium, which arrived from Turkey, and other drugs such as tobacco and cinchona from the Americas. Unfortunately, the plague returned to England in 1665. This epidemic became known as the Great Plague, and, as its predecessor, it was the bubonic plague, which spread due to poor sanitation, a lack of sewer system, and vermin such as rats and fleas. However, London's population speculated that it was due to miasma, God being mad at them, and the dogs and the cats that roamed the city. Yet, the English population had learned a little bit from past mistakes, and there was a more organized and coordinated response to the Great Plague than the Black Death. Government action was surprisingly fast and effective. As news arrived of a deadly disease spreading throughout Europe, a quarantine of ships coming to London was implemented. Plague doctors, dressed up in protective suits, went around documenting infections and deaths. If someone in a household was infected, the people inside the house were locked inside, forced to quarantine for 40 days, and the door was marked with a red cross and guarded by watchmen. Bodies were removed at night and buried in mass plague pits. Trade came to a halt, borders were closed, and the gathering of crowds in theaters and big masses was banned, and orders were issued to clean the streets. These methods were successful, managing to slow down and deal with the disease more methodically compared to the rampage of the Black Death. Yet there were some less successful methods too. As many believed that the spreading of the disease was due to the dogs and cats in the street, the mayor of London ordered to kill them all, which, besides being sad, probably made things worse, as the cats and the dogs contributed to the slowing down of the disease by eating the rats. Due to the belief in miasma, people were told to smoke and to start large fires in the street, believing that it was the bad air that caused the disease. To treat the sickness, traditional methods were still in place. Still believing in the four humors, doctors used bloodletting and leeches to purge and cure the patients. Also, prayer and supernatural treatments were common, such as using frogs, pigeons, snakes, and scorpions to try and draw the poison out. The doctors who implemented these treatments wore leather cloaks, gloves, and masks coated in wax, covering their whole bodies. The mask contained herbs to avoid smelling the streets, and the wax prevented blood or pus from soaking into the coat, therefore avoiding the disease. The doctors would also carry a stick to hit the disobedient or to separate themselves from infected people. This outfit, like the masks worn during COVID-19, saved the lives of numerous doctors. By the end of 1665, the Great Plague had killed around 100,000 people, almost a quarter of the population of London. Still, the fast and organized mobilization by the government helped to prevent many deaths and slow down the disease. By 1666, the plague began slowing down due to government measures, cold weather that helped to kill fleas and rats, and also because rats started to develop a resistance to the disease. Although unrelated, the Great Fire of London in 1666 led to a significant rebuilding of London. Buildings were built a little bit more spread out, and sewers were built underground, reducing the chance of a future outbreak and improving the overall public health in London. This is it for part 2. Make sure to check out all the other parts on the playlist, or check out the full video, which includes tips for studying and several past paper questions. Thanks for watching, and good luck.